It is time for the Writer's Block, our weekly look at all things related to sports. I'm Jenny Carlson here in the studios at the Oklahoman, joined by Cedric Golden in the studios of the Austin American-Statesman. Hello, friend.
What's going on, Jen?
Is the AC going there in Austin?
All I can say is at the plush offices of the Austin American-Statesman, the air conditioning is just fine, thank you.
Well, that has become a question there in Austin. Air conditioning, who has it? Who doesn't? It's AC Gate, and we're going to lead with that today, Cedric, because LSU came to Austin over the weekend for that big non-conference matchup. Game day was in town, lots of attention, primetime matchup. And after the game, which was won by LSU, Ed Orgeron, the coach of the Tigers, saying, "Hey, we didn't have any air conditioning in our locker room." What's the latest? Is there AC in the visitors' locker room? Was it on? Did it malfunction? What in the world is going on here, Cedric?
Well, Texas was so moved by his announcement that they sent out a statement from athletic director Chris Del Conte saying the AC is in good working order. And we didn't receive any complaints on game day and didn't receive any from La Tech. So I guess all's well that ends well. I'm wondering why Ed Orgeron went there. Maybe because his guys on defense were falling out every play and cramping up, which coincided with some really nice Texas drives, kind of some momentum stoppers, if you will. Was it gamesmanship? Was it AC, or were they just dehydrated? I don't know. But, I saw him described as a college football's version of Fred Flintstone. And I thought that was kind of cool, but something struck me as odd. Fred Flintstone never complained about air conditioning. Why should Ed Orgeron?
Maybe he had his dinosaur friends like fanning him back in the day. Maybe that's what Fred Flintstone had. I don't know. Yeah, didn't this all come about because basically there was talk that the Tigers were they weren't cramping, that they were faking some of the cramping to try to slow Texas down. Close game in the end. And then LSU brings up, well, we didn't have AC. Now you've had some coaches, Cedric, I've seen some coaches around the country say, hey, we know a lot of visitors' locker rooms aren't going to be plush. They aren't going to have the amenities. We bring our own fans. We bring our own AC units when that sort of thing might be in question. Heaters, those sorts of things when it gets cold. I don't know what the truth is. I have a hard time believing that some of these interior places which are not well ventilated, it is very hot in this part of the country, that there's no AC, but I don't know. Are you going to ask to tour the visitors' locker room next time that this stuff happens? It seems a little bit, I don't know. It all seems a little overwrought to me that this is the topic of the day.
I'm not asking that because the only time I've been in that visitors' locker room from what I can remember, and I've been on this beat since like 2002, Mike Leach, when he called the Red Raiders sheep, and that was a good rant. I just don't remember it being hot in there. And if you're Texas, what's your motivation for doing that? Yeah. And I'm not trying to be a homer here, Jen, but they're going to Baton Rouge next season. So why would they turn the AC off knowing that they got to go play the Bayou Bengals down there in 2020? So to me, I thought it was all about nothing. I think he just mentioned it in passing, and it took on a life of its own. Was it hot in that locker room? I don't know. I was in the press box, and it was nice and chilly in that press box, Jen. I felt great. I had a cold, frosty beverage and some popcorn. I had a little bit of everything. So I was living the life of Riley. I'm sorry those guys had to suffer through a hot game in September in Texas. Guess what? Most of those players are from Houston anyway. They know what they signed up for. Yeah. And for me, I just thought it was kind of petty of Orgeron to even bring that up.
Don't we all pick and choose where we're going to watch these games? I mean, essentially, it's sort of like when I was in high school band and, the tuba players would say, man, really heavy, it's hot, oh my gosh. I said, there's a reason I decided to play the flute and not the tuba. So we all decide where we're gonna, you know, endure these Saturdays. Are we gonna be on the field, in the stands, at home, press box, whatever? So you make those decisions, and then sometimes you got to live with maybe some uncomfortableness. But Cedric, maybe the bigger issue here, maybe we should be talking about this instead a lot more, is the fact that, you know, that game that Texas lost was a chance for the Big 12 to get a marquee non-conference win. There haven't been a lot of non-conference marquee matchups for the Big 12, so there haven't been a ton of opportunities. Now, that kind of rests on Iowa State having Iowa and Ames this week to get a really big sort of Power 5 win. There just haven't been many great matchups in non-conference, and now the Big 12's looking around saying, we really don't have much to hang our hat on in non-conference.
You know, that's a great point. I think they missed out on a great opportunity to land a blow for the Big 12. Texas beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and if they could have followed that up with a win over LSU, that not only would have made them a top 5, top 6 team in the nation as of this conversation, but it also would have struck a blow for the mighty Big 12 against the oh so powerful SEC. And now Texas is left having to think of the prospect of maybe having to go, what, 10-1 down the stretch,
Yeah.
Jen?
Yeah.
Or 9-1 down the stretch to get to the Big 12 title game, which I still think they're going to do, but it's going to be a lot harder. I didn't think a Big 12 team would make the CFP at the beginning of the year, and the fact that Texas lost doesn't help the conference's cause. Iowa beats Iowa. If Iowa State beats Iowa, does anyone really care, Jen?
Yeah. That's
not a marquee win. I mean, Iowa is a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team. They're not Ohio State. They're not Penn State. They're middle of the road. So let's call that what it is.
And
it'd be a nice win, but it's not a great win.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it would be for Iowa State a great win with an in-state rival. But yeah, you're right. But that's where we're left in the Big 12. We just don't have a ton of these great matchups. And at this point, that's kind of what's left on the table for being the big win for the Big 12. So I think you're right, Cedric. I think as it relates to the playoff, I think any team out of the Big 12 that expects to be in contention truly at the end of the year, they got to run the table from here, because there's just not a lot, unless you're looking at a scenario where you would lose to the team, as we saw Oklahoma do a year ago, lose to Texas in the regular season, then beat them at the end of the year in the Big 12 championship game. Maybe that gets a team there. But it's going to be hard to get in the playoff otherwise, because the Big 12 just doesn't have that non-conference strength of schedule to really boost itself up and say, you know, look at these teams that we beat. They just don't have those wins, and they aren't going to, because we're about out of non-conference play at this point. Conference play starting next week, as Oklahoma State will head to Texas. We know that game looms. So a lot of questions out there for how strong is the Big 12. A team's going to really have to make almost an undefeated run, I think, to be in that conversation. All right, let's go segment 2. Let's do What a Boon. And this is a look back at the impact of Boone Pickens. Cedric, a Texas guy, a Texas oilman, born in Oklahoma but lived in Texas. You got to know him over the years. The Longhorns were clearly a team that he, as an Oklahoma State fan, looked to get his university on some sort of level playing field with all the donations he made. But he was no stranger in your neck of the woods in Austin, that's for sure.
What a big loss for not only for the college football community and the business community at large, but also for people in our region, Jen. T. Boone Pickens was a monolithic figure in our lives. He was the Phil Knight of Oklahoma State. Don't get it twisted. He put Oklahoma State on the map with countless donations, facility upgrades, coaching upgrades. He brought the program, he helped bring it back to relevancy after Barry Sanders, after Thurman Thomas. And I for one, just always got a big kick out of it. We would go to Stillwater, and he'd show up, and so he'd send someone over. Mr. Pickens would like for you guys to come over to his suite. And we'd chat with him at halftime, and he loved to shoot the bull. He was a straight shooter. I do know this, Jen. As far as about my personal connection with him, Kirk Bowles and I started this podcast on Second Thought on Hook'em.com a couple of years ago, and we had T-Boone in a phone call from, I guess it was at episode 28, and so he starts talking, and Kirk goes, "Well, yeah, what's going on with Gundy?" He goes, "Oh, Mike doesn't return my calls. We don't really have a relationship." And I know that turned the whole state of Oklahoma on its ear. Trammell and the crew had to get busy that day.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the thing about T-Boone with what you said is absolutely right. A straight shooter, and lots of times that came across as just hilarious to those of us who were listening. He wasn't trying to be funny, and yet he was so honest in his assessment and the things that he said. Obviously he, being in business in the state of Texas, had a lot of friends who were UT fans, UT alum, boosters, those sorts of things. He was always wanting to try to get his alma mater up to that level, and I think he was very pleased with being able to see those UT friends and talk about Oklahoma State's wins against them in football. That was a big deal. But on the flip side, he was also not shy about talking about Oklahoma State's record in recent years against Oklahoma. Even as they had started to beat Texas on a regular basis, they were not beating Oklahoma on a regular basis, only a couple wins over the last decade plus. So definitely a bone of contention for T-Boone Pickens that they did not do better against Oklahoma regularly. But Cedric, I think that we can safely say, while he did so much for Oklahoma State, I think that had an impact on the Big 12 in general. I mean, you see Oklahoma State being a regular contender. At a time when Texas had fallen back, Oklahoma State was able to step into that void. And now as Texas returns to that contender type of status, Oklahoma State's still there, still very much a team that people will look at and say, wonder if the Cowboys are going to play for a Big 12 championship again. I think that has helped to change the way the Big 12 looks, but also teams that maybe down the pecking order are saying, hey, we're going to go out and build stadiums, we're going to do these sorts of things, see what it can do for our program. I think we've seen a lot of sort of that tide raising all boats, and I think one of the parts of that tide that was pretty significant was Boone Pickens.
You can't win in big time athletics without money now, Jen. Everybody has players, but if you want to get the elite players and the elite coaches and build elite facilities and be elite in the marketing department, you got to have a fat cat with fat money and willing to break bread to the right people. I'm telling you, Texas had two guys, actually several. Joe Jamel was one, the big-time lawyer from Houston who's passed, and Frank Denius, a military veteran who's also many times a millionaire, maybe a billionaire. Those men were very, very generous with their money and their time. And if you're going to compete on a national level, and Oklahoma State wanted to be that contender, they wanted to rise up the ranks of the Big 12 and join Texas and Oklahoma, they had to have a guy willing to not only support as far as emotional support and love for that school, but also provide the monetary support that's very much needed to compete in this marketplace.
Yeah, and even as we talk about, the sort of the ripples of what was done at Oklahoma State, I don't think we are saying in any form or fashion that the biggest impact, I mean, it was in Stillwater, it was on Oklahoma State, a stadium that had really become antiquated and was in serious need of repair, and it mirrored the program. I mean, the program needed the infusion that Boone Pickens gave them. His initial giant gift of $165 million was really almost all football. That big gift, he'd given about $100 million prior to that, but that one was the football, we're going to get this turned around. and it has been significant. I think that it was the money, but it was also Boone's attitude. He talked about winning championships, and they won a Big 12 championship. They came real close to playing back in the BCS days for the national championship in 2011. So, he talked about things that maybe Oklahoma State fans, somewhere deep in the recesses of their heart and their mind, they might have thought, one day I'd like to see this. But he gave voice to those things and really said, we can do this as Oklahoma State. And so I think there was great power in that. I think that will continue to carry on. Obviously, his financial gifts, they will continue to pay dividends to the school. But that attitude, I think, was something that Oklahoma State fans could really grab onto and feel good about. They always had the pride, but I think to really see that in action and hear that from Boone Pickens was a really, really big deal. All right, let's go on to segment 3. This one we're calling, What Can Brown Do For You? And Cedric, it's an NFL, all NFL in this one, but Antonio Brown, the Cleveland Browns, and not a great opener for Baker Mayfield. We'll talk about some non-Brown stuff, but I feel like we got to start with Antonio Brown. Since we've talked, he was going to play in the Raiders opener, then he asked to be released, signed by the Patriots, now under investigation with several sexual assault and rape allegations. His future now with the Patriots very much up in the air. I don't know. I can't hardly catch my breath. It feels like 2 or 3 or 4 years worth of stories here with one guy in a week's time. Where's your head on this whole thing as it relates to Antonio Brown?
Well, he's the gift that keeps on giving if you like good copy. But man, I'm telling you, if I'm Bill Belichick, I'm sitting there going, what have I gotten into? We know what he can do on Sunday afternoon, Jen. But the problem is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Those are real problems in his life. He is just nutty as a fruitcake, and now it's taken on a more sinister look with these rape allegations. Man, the Patriot way is kind of like the old mafia, Jen, where we watched some mob movies like Goodfellas, Casino, and The Godfather. The mob always wanted business to go really quiet. Mm-hmm. The money's rolling in, everybody's undercover, not a lot of noise, and everything's humming along. Antonio Brown is like a bullhorn, a jackhammer inside your living room, and you're like, what's going on downstairs? Someone's got a jackhammer in my living room. Yeah. That's Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
Yeah.
And now he's may have broken some laws.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be mischievous and, helmet gate and that kind of stuff and bad bunions and cryotherapy. It's quite another to be accused of rape. Now it's really serious.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. I think that the Patriots obviously welcomed the jackhammer in. I mean, they knew
they did.
He had a track record. This was not unknown, but I think what's yet to be known is, what did they know about these pending legal ramifications? Did Drew Rosenhaus, Antonio Brown's agent, what was the talk? Was there any talk? Was there knowledge that this might be coming? I guess I'm always of the mind that the NFL, its teams, its all of the inner workings of the league, that nothing is ever really secret, that they know before we know what's going to happen and all of the things that are out there. So that will be fascinating as this legal case proceeds. If this is an allegation that's found to be credible, what then do the Patriots do? What does the NFL do? Where do they come down on this? They've had several instances in the last few years where maybe not exactly, no one case is the same, but they've had several incidents that they've had to deal with. How does this one compare? I think it remains to be seen, but it's definitely, you're right, Cedric. This is a story that every time you turn around, it feels like something else that should be the biggest thing to happen has now been dwarfed by something else that's even bigger with Antonio Brown, which makes the games and opening weekend of games, you know, thinking about that loss that the Browns had, that feels small. Like, is anybody actually talking about the games in the NFL these days?
No, they're talking about this guy, and you wonder, as of this taping, there's still a couple of days until the game.
Yeah.
New England against Miami. So who's to say he's even active for that game? Yeah. Who's to say that he even shows up? It's a miracle how bad this has been for the Oakland Raiders, for anyone who's affiliated with Antonio Brown, Drew Rosenhaus. How many times have you heard someone go, poor Drew Rosenhaus? I feel bad for that guy. I mean, he's having to spin this thing. I mean, it is a horrible, horrible, horrible time that we're talking about a guy who's obviously narcissistic and maybe in need of professional help instead of the games. But he moves the needle, and people, he got like 10 million views or something like that in 2 hours. So people care, but I just wonder, where are his people in his corner going, hey, Antonio, you got to settle down and let's just play some football.
Well, yeah, it's the train wreck. You know, you can't look away from the train wreck. And for a lot of this time, it's been about Antonio Brown doing things that seemingly hurt Antonio Brown. But now, with this situation involving these rape allegations, that takes on a whole new tenor. So we're going to have to see what the NFL decides, how quickly they decide it, what do the Patriots do in the meantime. Lots of unanswered questions on this one. But I mentioned the Browns earlier, the Cleveland Browns, that is. You know, Cedric, a team that a lot of people thought were going to be contenders for the Super Bowl, much like the Cowboys, who had a much better result against the Giants on Sunday. But Cleveland, just really a mess. I mean, they were really just, it was a messy, messy game. And you never really felt like they were, you know, they just didn't look like a team that was going to go from week one where they were to, you know, see great an upward trajectory. Maybe they get it all fixed, but they were really messy in week one.
I'm going to tell you what happened, Jen. Someone forgot to tell the Cleveland Browns that you actually have to win some games before you can win the AFC North.
Yeah.
No one's ever won a division title in August, but that's what the hype was about. And now you look around, and Baker Mayfield, who spent part of the offseason ripping Sam Ehlinger and whatever else.
Daniel Jones, anybody he could come up with.
instead of being an NFL quarterback. So he spent the offseason doing just non-NFL stuff. But then you get Odell Beckham in, and it's a very talented roster. He's wearing a $350,000 watch during the game. What are you doing? I mean, that is the height of idiocy. It's such a look at me generation that I don't get it, man. These millennials, they kill me. But here's the thing, Jen. They can still win that division.
Sure. But
no one's talking about the Cleveland Browns anymore. You got worked by 30 at the house by the Tennessee Titans, who've been trying to get rid of Marcus Mariota for the last 6 months. And you give up a 75-yard catch to Derrick Henry, who weighs like 250 pounds. I mean, that was an effort thing. It starts at the top, and Freddie Kitchens, the head coach, is in over his head. He's a glorified coordinator who should be an assistant coach, but they thought they could bump him up because of his relationship with Baker. This thing could go off the rails so fast. Yeah. Meanwhile, you got Baltimore looking like that they can win that division. Cincinnati looks good. Pittsburgh got off to a slow start, but you know Pittsburgh's going to win some games. I'm really interested to see if Cleveland bounces back, but boy, that was a really bad start, and I'm sure the dog pound is in a state of unrest.
Yeah, and you know, in a game, like you say, in a game that they're looking to be the better team, to be so ill-equipped to handle the Titans, that was really surprising. I mean, NFL, any team can win in any time. It's so, the equality across the board, you know, it's there. So you can see teams winning, but losing by 30. I mean, the offensive line just struggling. Baker Mayfield at crunch time throwing 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. I mean, just so many things that went bad when they needed to go better. I think that's the Browns got their work cut out for them. Let's put it that way. Because teams like the Cowboys, who I mentioned earlier, Cedric, they played the way you want to see a team that could contend for the Super Bowl play. They go out against the Giants, who they're better than, and they take care of business. They played the way you want to see a contender play in Week 1.
Dallas Cowboys may be the most balanced team in all of football.
Very
Jen.
good.
Good defense, a good pass rush, an elite running back, a quarterback who's coming into his own in Dak Prescott, an elite receiver in Amari Cooper, an up-and-coming receiver in Michael Gallup. And let's not overlook the addition of Randall Cobb. Huge upgrade from Cole Beasley in the slot. So they have it going right now. I just can't, Jen, I'm just going to put it out there right now. I just can't wait to see how they mess this up. That's going to be fun.
Wow. Okay. So Cedric saying today, after Week 1, how the Cowboys mess this up is gonna. Okay. We're gonna take note of that. You know, talking about how you snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, the poor Houston Texans. Oh, I mean, maybe the most heartbreaking of games in Week 1 was that Monday night game. They marched down, game-winning touchdown, so you think, against the Saints with less than a minute remaining, but they just left too much time and gave too much cushion in the secondary to Drew Brees. That guy will beat you every time. Cedric, I mean, the Texans, their hard luck, it just continues.
It was awful. Did they really think Drew Brees was going to try to throw it 55 yards into the end zone with a Hail Mary? I really want to know. The cushion they gave the receivers at the end of that game, knowing Brees had a timeout, just baffles the mind. Here's the question, Jen, and Kirk Bowles asked me this on the podcast. What if they would have just let him catch the ball and not touched him? Would the clock have run out? I mean, doesn't the play continue until a defensive guy touches a player that's on the ground?
Yeah.
They couldn't have called the timeout. So they weren't thinking there. Because I was surprised that Brees didn't throw an out route, but he threw it in the middle of the field.
Yep.
And I guess a defensive player's instincts tell him to touch that guy when he's in front of him to tackle him. But I don't think that he would have been able to get that time out if they don't touch him, and the clock would have run out. But that's neither here nor there. The problem is the Houston Texans wasted a golden opportunity to land a big blow early in the season. Deshaun Watson, Jen, friend of Gatehouse, I might add. He was at our Best of Preps event.
That's right.
He is box office.
Yeah.
He's a tough guy. He stuck his nose in there early, got hurt, got up, made every throw. I love watching him. I think if they can keep him upright, the Houston Texans are going to win that division and maybe win a playoff game.
Yeah, that was such a great ending to a game. Obviously not if you're a Texans fan, but if you're just a fan watching. But man, as you mentioned, opportunities. Goes back to what we were talking about with the Cleveland Browns. If you've got an opportunity to win at home like the Browns did, or win on the road like the Texans did, man, I know it's just Week 1, but wins are so hard in the NFL. If you've got them in your grasp, you've got a great opportunity. You want to take it. So you start to see those patterns develop now that we head into Week 2, which means we'll have a lot to talk about next week, Cedric. So stay tuned. I know you'll be watching. I'll be watching. We hope you come back for the Writer's Block. It'll be more football. Who knows what else we'll talk about, but be sure to join us next week.